2 gold medals up for grabs thanks to the addition of 4 new events, including mass start speed skating, where South Korea is aiming for gold. After years of frosty ties, China and Japan are trying to make amends. The two sides have agreed to push for a 3-way summit with South Korea as the simmering tension with North Korea persists. Beijing's top diplomat says China recognizes Japan has made efforts to turn over a new leaf, and his country will try to do the same as well. Our Park Seo-yeon with the details.
In a rare move, China and Japan have decided to put their differences aside and get on with handling issues surrounding the region, especially those stemming from North Korea. In a meeting between Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi and his Japanese counterpart Taro Kono in Beijing over the weekend, the two sides agreed to push for a trilateral summit with South Korea and to resume reciprocal visits.
North Korea is now an urgent issue for the international community as a whole. I hope to deepen our bilateral coordination on certain issues and hopefully resolve them as well.
Appearing to be on the same page, the diplomats emphasized the need to ramp up pressure on North Korea over its nuclear development, and they confirmed their respective wills to fully implement UN Security Council resolutions on the regime. The two also saw eye to eye on the need for a trilateral summit with Seoul, Beijing, and Tokyo, tentatively looking at sometime in April. On the issue of their bilateral ties, the two diplomats agreed to resume reciprocal visits by their leaders, underscoring that Asia's two largest economies are eager to mend ties in the year marking their 40th anniversary of bilateral ties. Relations between China and Japan have long been tense over historical issues and their territorial dispute over the uninhabited Diaoyu Islands, known as the Senkakus in Japan in the East China Sea. The islands are controlled by Tokyo but also claimed by Beijing, and military tensions often flare up in the area. Park Seo-yeon, Arirang News.
South Korea's ruling party, government and presidential office have vowed all-out efforts for the successful hosting of the PyeongChang Winter Olympics. This came during their first 3-way meeting of the year on Monday, where they said the event will be an opportunity to raise Korea's national status and brand value, as well as reduce geopolitical risks. They vowed to thoroughly take last-minute checkups to ensure a successful Olympics, and they also called for cooperation from the opposition to not engage in political strife regarding North Korea's participation. As for the hospital fire in Miryang last week that killed 39 people, the three sides sent their condolences to the victims' families and vowed to take all necessary measures and pass related bills to prevent further accidents. They also promised to cooperate so that the National Assembly can pass urgent bills related to people's livelihoods during the February parliamentary session that kicks off on Tuesday. A special avian influenza alert has been issued by Korea's Agriculture Ministry after 2 new cases of the highly pathogenic flu were confirmed over the weekend. Officials on Sunday said a chicken farm in Pyeongtaek, Gyeonggi-do province was hit with the H5N6 strain of the virus, despite the city's best efforts to prevent an outbreak. Quarantine teams have already culled more than 400,000 chickens at 4 farms in the area and plans to cull 90,000 more at 10 other farms within a 3-kilometre radius. The first confirmation came on Saturday, triggering quarantine teams to cull 190,000 birds. In a bid to contain the outbreak, strict vehicle movement restrictions have been put in place around the affected farms. Now, South Korea's latest sporting sensation, tennis star Chung Hyeon, is back in Korea after his amazing performance at the Australian Open, a run that saw him make the last 4. The 21-year-old was greeted by hundreds of cheering fans at Incheon International Airport, and Chung has even more reason to celebrate as he has jumped almost 30 spots in the world rankings with his top 4 finish. Lee Seung-jae has more on his triumphant return.
Rewriting South Korea's tennis history, Chung Hyeon returned home to a hero's welcome on Sunday after a historic run to the semi-finals of the 2018 Australian Open. Chung, who's currently 58th in the ATP rankings, defeated some elite players, including 4th-ranked Alexander Zverev and 6-time Australian Open winner Novak Djokovic, before a painful blister of his foot left him with no choice but to retire against the eventual champion Roger Federer in the semifinals. But for the 21-year-old, the pain is past him, and he said he will cherish every moment of his time in Melbourne.
My first Grand Slam semi-finals, beating Novak Djokovic after 2 years. I enjoyed every minute of it.
With this semi-final finish, Chung is certain to crack the top 30 of the ATP rankings and will become the highest-ranked South Korean player in history. Even the legendary Roger Federer believes Chung will one day become a top 10 player, as Korea's newest sports sensation hopes to turn his famous opponent's words into reality.
I want to aim high and prove to the players who have rated me so highly that they were right.
Back at home, Chung will focus on receiving treatment on his injured foot and will later decide whether he should compete at an ATP Tour event in Bulgaria next month. For him, the historic semi-final finish is just a beginning, as he hopes to win his second career title in the near future. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Now, for a look at stories making headlines around the world, and we start with the unrest in Russia. Amid protests calling for a presidential election boycott, opposition leader Alexei Navalny has been released after he was detained for a period by police. For more on this and other news, let's turn to our Noah Aram. So, Aram, the detention was yet another crackdown by Russian authorities to try and silence President Putin's most vocal critic.
That's right, Mark. Navalny appeared at a rally on Sunday to urge voters to boycott what he said would be a rigged presidential election in March. He was then dragged feet first by police into a patrol van, sparking chaotic scenes. In a tweet soon after he was detained, Navalny encouraged his supporters to join the nationwide protests, which Russian authorities said were illegal. He has since been freed without charge, but his lawyer says he will have to appear in court at a later date and may then face charges that may include illegally organising a protest, which could see him face 30 days behind bars if found guilty. Earlier on Sunday, police raided the opposition leader's campaign headquarters in Moscow in what they said was a response to a bomb threat. It came as the office was broadcasting a YouTube video to cover the rallies, which have not been mentioned by Russian state media. 8 staff members were said to have been detained, with computers and cameras also being seized. The election is expected to be comfortably won by President Putin, and Navalny has been barred from running. But the Kremlin seems to be wary of Navalny's ability to use social media to mobilize crowds of mostly young protesters in major cities in Russia. However, the number of participants who showed up at Sunday's protests were said to be lower than previous demonstrations Navalny had staged, indicating that momentum may have shifted away from him. 5 people have been shot dead at a car wash in the U.S. state of Pennsylvania. Police said they received reports of gunshots being fired early Sunday at Ed Carr's Wash in the Melcroft community of Salt Lick Township, about 90 kilometers southeast of Pittsburgh. The victims were identified only as 3 men and 2 women in their 20s and 30s, and another person was said to have been injured and has been taken to hospital. Police say they have no motive yet for the shooting, though family members of the victims say a domestic dispute spurred the violence. Heavy snowfall that has begun falling since Saturday night in the Iranian capital of Tehran has caused havoc, shutting down airports as well as schools. Major highways heading to Tehran were also blocked due to icy conditions, leaving many motorists stuck in their vehicles for hours. Power outages were also reported in several districts. Despite the transport snags, many welcomed the heavy snow, which came amid a severe drought. As we heard before, Roger Federer has won the Australian Open for the 6th time, becoming the first man ever to secure 20 Grand Slam titles. The 36-year-old Swiss tennis star beat Croatian Marin Cilic in 5 sets in Sunday's final. After a gap of almost 5 years between winning his 17th and 18th major titles, Federer has now won 3 of the last 5, having also claimed an 8th Wimbledon title in July. After Sunday's match, a tearful Federer said his fairy tale continued.
Now to the latest on the deadly hospital fire in southeastern Korea that killed dozens of people last Friday. Another patient, a woman in her 80s, has succumbed to her injuries, raising the death toll to 39. Most of the deceased were elderly people, as the hospital in Miryang was mostly catered toward taking care of old and frail patients. Over 150 people are being treated for injuries. In the aftermath of the disaster, Korea's Interior Ministry says the government is providing funds worth $940,000 to help clean up the damage and improve safety. A portion of the grant will also be dispatched to related ministries that have dispatched specialists to provide psychological treatment and consultations for the injured and the families of the victims. The Seoul Central District Court will wrap up its corruption trial of former Presidential Secretary for Civil Affairs Byung-woo this afternoon, 9 months after he was first indicted. Woo, who served under ousted former President Park Geun-hye from 2015 to 2016, was indicted in April of last year on multiple charges, including disrupting the special investigation into him and neglecting his duty to prevent wrongdoings by presidential aides. The verdict is due on February 14th. A separate trial on Woo's alleged involvement in the National Intelligence Service's illegal surveillance of government officials will begin on Tuesday. Now, if you're watching and you trade digital currency, you might want to pay special attention to this next story. Forensic firm Chain Analysis says online criminals are ditching the world's most popular cryptocurrency, Bitcoin. Its report shows the proportion of Bitcoin transactions related to dark web sites, where people often engage in criminal activities, had fallen from 30% to under 1%. Why? Because it takes so long to process transactions and fees are too high. But while criminals may be turning away from Bitcoin for ordinary transactions, they haven't lost interest in it altogether, as Bitcoin theft has risen from $3 million in 2013 to $95 million in the span of just 3 years. The firm added that in 2017 alone, some $90 million worth of Bitcoin had been stolen, using prices at the date of the hack. Now, the overuse of antibiotics has resulted in the worldwide problem of bacteria that are resistant to medicine called so-called superbugs. And to help medical professionals get on top of these dangerous infections, Korean researchers have come up with a new way to detect superbugs that would help save a lot of time in treating patients and stop the spread of these infections. Jo Sung-min reports.
A group of researchers at Korea Basic Science Institute developed a new method to detect antibiotic-resistant bacteria, also known as superbugs, within 30 minutes. The recent development is considered as a huge leap forward in the biotech sector, as properly detecting superbugs currently takes at least a week. Superbugs occur when bacteria become resistant to several types of antibiotics. Without timely treatment, superbugs can lead to dangerous conditions such as pressure sore, urinary tract infection, and pneumonia. According to data, more than 5,000 cases of infections in Korea were caused by antibiotic-resistant bacteria in the second half of 2017. The team that conceived the method says the new detecting technology omits the entire procedure of bacterial cultivation, thus saving a considerable amount of time. The head researcher of the team says studying the proteins on the superbugs was key to the development of the technology.
We came up with the technology after synthesizing antibodies to the antigenic proteins found in superbugs.
Currently, the research team has teamed up with a health tech company to commercialize the technology into a portable bacteria detecting device that could be distributed in the market. The firm that is working on commercializing the kit says the finished product is expected to have a massive impact on preventing the spread of bacterial outbreaks and infections. Jo Sung-min, Arirang News.
Now, cadmium is a substance mainly found in fine dust and cigarette smoke, and it's known to cause a whole host of really serious illnesses. A recent study shows that cadmium exposure could even slow down the pace at which you walk. Our Park Se-young with more.
On dusty days like this, an average of 44 particles per million of cadmium is detected in the air. When cadmium is absorbed into the body, it first affects the bronchial epithelial cells in the lungs. Around 80% of cells died just 1 day after cadmium exposure, similar to the effects of smoking a pack of cigarettes. The particles also induced inflammations and activated specific genes linked to the cell's death.
If these specific genes increase during the cell's deterioration, the cells end up dying. Other cells in the respiratory system also become dysfunctional, causing increased inflammations and respiratory diseases.
Cadmium also weakens people's motor skills. According to a study of over 3,600 Americans over the age of 50, those in the top 20% for cadmium exposure walked 3.3 meters per minute slower than the 20% with the least exposure. This is equivalent to 7 years of aging. Since it's difficult to remove cadmium from the body, experts advise people to drink water frequently and prevent its absorption. Park Se-young, Arirang News.
Now, South Korea is the 6th largest source of international adoptees. Over 166,000 Koreans have been adopted by families from other countries, and a great number of them have gone on long, challenging journeys to find their birth relatives. But unfortunately, there's very little chance of them actually succeeding. Our Park Hee-jun had the chance to meet with some adoptees currently searching for their roots.
It was not their choice to leave their country of birth or their parents, but the tens of thousands of Koreans who were adopted by overseas families often live with an unbearable curiosity about their origins. A majority of them return to Korea, but only to face many obstacles during their quest to find what they're looking for.
Rosita is an international adoptee visiting Korea in search of her roots. Adopted by a family in the United States as a baby, she has been doing everything she can for years to track down her biological mother. But because of a lack of records and adoption agencies refusing to share what little information they have, the likelihood of succeeding is extremely low. In fact, according to the Korea Adoption Services, 71% of adoptees hope to locate their birth relatives, but only 28% succeed.
Really, the biggest obstacle is that when my birth mother gave birth to me, she didn't leave her name, or if she did, there was no written record of it. It makes it, almost impossible, right, to track that down. So you have to go through other means.
Other means include submitting DNA samples to the police, who collect a database of missing people, which adoptees and their birth parents can also use.
I really feel that it's the most important part of my search for my birth mother or my birth family, because if she does decide to search for me, I feel like it's a pretty logical choice to go to the police station. So if there's a DNA record of me here, she could also leave her DNA, and if we make a match, that would prove that we're related.
To make it easier for the two sides to reunite, experts say there needs to be a shift in Korea's overemphasis on privacy protection.
The protection of the birth parents' privacy conflicts with the adoptees' right to know. There needs to be more discussion among lawmakers and experts in the field. There's only so much we can do for adoptees within the boundaries of the law.
It's only when these changes take place that adoptees say they can truly and completely feel like they are at home in Korea.
Before I came to Korea that very first time, I had a lot of anxiety about would I not like Korea? Would it feel weird? Would I dislike the smells or the food or anything, right? And what was so shocking is the minute I touched ground, it was as though the smell of Korea was like a blanket being wrapped around me. Because I think on a base biological cellular level, we remember. Right? I can't remember as an adult, but I remember. Biologically, I remember.
The adoptees' search for their birth parents goes on. Park Hee-jun, Arirang News.
Good morning. Cold winter weather is here again to bite into the new week. While cold wave warning has been downgraded to an advisory here in the capital, but expect to see a big drop in temperatures compared to yesterday, along with continuous dry air. In fact, regions on the west coast, including Gwangju, will see snowfall, while the capital area could also see snow flurries during the day. On that note, here are the readings for this afternoon. Seoul will only make it to -6 degrees Celsius this afternoon, and that's about 5 degrees lower than yesterday, while Busan and Jeju will only make it to 3 degrees, and that's nearly 5 degrees lower than their seasonal averages. Now we'll see readings easing up tomorrow afternoon, then readings will go back to seasonal averages until Friday, before another cold snap strikes the nation. With that, let's take a look at the international weather for viewers around the world. While many parts in South Korea will be in the grip of freezing temperatures again, most cities in North Korea will have even colder temperatures all day. And as for the rest of Asia, Tokyo had another freezing morning, but things will get much milder by the afternoon. Meanwhile, authorities have warned of a severe heat wave in South Australia, with temperatures in some areas nudging 50 degrees Celsius on Sunday, and blistering temperatures are on tap for much of the nation. Heading to North America, Chicago and Montreal will be freezing, so dress warmly on your way out. And as for South America, Sao Paulo and Rio de Janeiro will have a wet day along with scattered thunderstorms at times. Taking you to Europe, Stockholm and Moscow will be snowy, but Moscow's temperatures will be a lot higher than here in Seoul. Lastly, to Africa, major cities on the map will be under plenty of sunshine. And that's all the weather update for now.
And that's where we're going to leave the news for now as well on this Monday morning here in Seoul. Our next bulletin is coming up at noon Korea time. So until then, goodbye.